Gidhu Yuwat. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up.
6 months into the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, Hamas has not been eradicated, and some analysts say the war could escalate even further. The spring meetings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank Group are underway in Washington, D.C., with discussions ranging from poverty eradication, economic development, and aid effectiveness. We'll have a live report. And entrepreneur Gize Neguse is on a mission to introduce Americans to Ethiopian culture through tej, a drink also known as honey wine. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
Senior U.S. and Israeli officials will hold a virtual meeting on Thursday about Israel's plans for the southern Gaza city of Rafah as Washington seeks alternatives to an Israeli offensive. According to U.S. and Israeli officials, the meeting is a follow-up to a similar meeting held on April 1st. 6 months into the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, Israel is at a crossroads. Israeli forces have not been able to eradicate Hamas or free the remaining hostages, and some analysts say the war could escalate even further. Linda Gradstein reports for VOA from Jerusalem.
Israeli media reports say Israel will buy 40,000 tents to evacuate Palestinians from Rafah ahead of a planned ground invasion. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this week said that Israel has a date for an invasion of Rafah in southern Gaza. Israeli analysts say that even without an invasion of Rafah, the 6-month-old war with Hamas is at a crossroads.
It can be escalation to a regional war because of Iran, because of Hezbollah, and it will move from Gaza to the north, from a limited war in Gaza to a regional war, and it can de-escalate towards a process that will de-escalate the war and will fix some of the problems. And we're really facing crucial days, maybe a week.
Both Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon are proxies of Iran, and Yadlin says tensions with Iran have recently skyrocketed since Israeli strikes killed a senior Iranian general in Damascus last month.
Israel was very careful not to target Iranians. Since the 7th and the 8th of October, when Iran launched its proxies against Israel, from Lebanon, from Syria, from Yemen, from Iraq, Israel changed the policy, and in this case, it seems like a big hit to Iran.
Israel has also come under growing international criticism for the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The UN says more than a quarter of Gaza's population is on the verge of starvation. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights told the BBC that there is plausible evidence that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war in Gaza.
The collective punishment that was declared with the siege is indeed amounts to a war crime, and it needs to be dealt as such.
Israel says the problem is distribution of aid and says it is not responsible.
So there's enough supplies going in. Where the problem lies is in the picking up the goods that are delivered and distributing them. So that is a very central bottleneck that we're seeing. And I think that here we need to ask where the UN organizations are, where the civil society organizations are, where are the people that need to distribute these goods?
Egypt has been hosting indirect talks between Israel and Hamas for a ceasefire and hostage release amid conflicting views on their chances for success. Linda Gradstein, VOA News, Jerusalem.
At the United Nations headquarters, discussions are ongoing regarding the issue of a full membership and statehood for Palestinians and aid to Gaza, as Israel pushes for the dismantling of United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees. For more on this report, I'm joined from New York by VOA's UN correspondent Margaret Bashir. Margaret, there's a lot we know happening around Israel and the Palestinian issue at the UN this week. Can you bring us up to date?
Thanks, Esther. Yeah, we have the many Arab and Muslim foreign ministers in New York today. They're here for a Security Council meeting where the Palestinians are going to ask for full UN membership. And full membership, in other words, really statehood, goes through the Security Council as a first step. You must pass that hurdle. The Council must recommend you for statehood, and then it goes to the General Assembly. Well, we know the Palestinians have a lot of support in the General Assembly because in 2012 they got their status upgraded to non-permanent member state with almost 140 votes. But in the Security Council, they face the potential U.S. veto, and it's likely to come today. But the Palestinians are saying, look, Israel was created by a UN General Assembly resolution in 1947. Why do we have to wait for final status talks? Why can't we have a resolution to become a state too? And they say it would ease tensions in the region because they're at the root of many of the problems in the Middle East.
Margaret, we'll see what that comes to be, but let's go forward and look at there's also the famine looming in parts of Gaza, as we know, and the Biden administration has also pressed for better access for aid agencies. Has that situation improved?
Well, Secretary General Antonio Guterres briefed this council meeting a little earlier today. He said there are severe limitations imposed by Israel on the delivery of aid in Gaza. He cited things like, well, they inspect aid, but they clear the trucks very late in the day, and then aid workers can't get on the road inside Gaza in the dark when the roads are broken and there are unexploded ordnance and mines and things littering the streets. It's very dangerous for them. So also they inspect trucks and take one item off arbitrarily, and then the whole truck has to be re-inspected. So there are problems, but he said there's been very limited progress, including the opening of a couple of new crossing points.
Margaret, many thanks for that update. VOA's UN correspondent Margaret Bashir live for us from the United Nations headquarters in New York. Now, the spring meetings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank Group are taking place right here in Washington, D.C., and among the issues being discussed are the world economic outlook, poverty eradication, economic development, and aid effectiveness. For more, VOA's Ignatius Arnold joins us live from IMF headquarters in Washington, D.C. Ignatius, IMF's managing director laid out the institution's global policy agenda, but how did she address the critical global economic growth?
All right, Esther, thank you for having me. Indeed, Kristalina Georgieva, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, laid out what she calls the global policy agenda. There are three priority areas for her, according to her, in the face of several challenges that have bedeviled the entire planet, which includes wars that we have experienced, inflation that has impacted the high cost of prices, and indeed the cost of living around the world. One or chief among those priorities is to rebuild the fiscal buffers, as she called it. She says that in most parts of the country, unfortunately, fiscal capacity is dwindling, and it's very critical for governments around the world to rebuild those capacities, because emergencies and shocks will continue to befall humanity. And so by doing that, they will be able to withstand the shocks that these challenges will bring to the economies, Esther. And then second, she also mentioned the rebuilding or reviving growth prospects, which would include cutting red tapes, investment in green energy, and indeed the digital innovation, as well as increasing female participation in the labor market. And third is what she says is the renewal of commitment towards the IMF as an organization itself. She did say that over the course of the several months, there have been 300 billion US dollars that have been disbursed to almost 100 countries around the world. Esther.
Ignatius, still there are concerns about productivity grinding low. What did she say, attribute this to, and can it be reversed?
Well, she did mention the penetration of technology and says that although there have been, increased penetration of tech around the world, its success has been slower than was envisaged. She also talked about the aging population around the world, meaning that there are people growing old, but then not young people are coming into the labor market. She highlighted the success stories, for example, of the United States, mentioning the open market for migrants that makes them competitive ahead of regions like the European Union, and how the International Monetary Fund is allocating resources to help nations tackle productivity across the world.
Ignatius, very quickly, Zambia has been very lucky with debt restructuring. Does IMF, have confidence Zambia can stay afloat?
Indeed, she talked about the fact that she's upbeat about where Zambia is going. First of all, beginning to applaud them for undertaking a very complicated IMF program that was firmed up a few months ago that has given them the badly needed relief.
I guess we're going to have to leave it there, Ignatius. It's kind of freezing. All right, Ignatius and all there, live for us from the IMF headquarters here in Washington, D.C. U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump is in a New York courtroom this week for jury selection in a case about his allegedly falsifying business records. Meanwhile, his Democratic opponent, President Joe Biden, is on the campaign trail, talking about the candidates' competing visions of economic fairness. VOA correspondent Scott Stearns has our story.
Joe Biden and Donald Trump had decidedly different schedules this week. Trump is in a New York courtroom facing 34 felony counts of falsifying business records.
I don't know how you can have a trial that's going on right in the middle of an election. Not fair. Not fair.
Biden's on the campaign trail near his childhood home in the neighboring state of Pennsylvania. Trump's trial involves him attempting to squash unflattering news stories during his 2016 campaign. Prosecutors say Trump falsified payments to a former lawyer to hide that the money was going to two women who said they had earlier extramarital sexual encounters with the then candidate. Trump has pleaded not guilty to the charges, and his lawyers argue the payments were legitimate legal expenses. Trump says tying him up in court is election interference by a weaponized judiciary.
This is an assault on our country. It's a country that's failing. It's a country that's run by an incompetent man who's very much involved in this case. This is really an attack on a political opponent. That's all it is.
Trump does not have to testify at this trial, but former federal prosecutor Nyama Ramani thinks politics means he will.
This case is as much for the courtroom as it is for the court of public opinion. And Trump is in the middle of an election year, and he will take the stand and he will talk to the American people and those undecided voters. I think him asserting his right to remain silent, I think that will be used against him by undecided voters.
With his opponent in court, Biden has the presidential campaign trail to himself.
Donald Trump looks at the world differently than you and me. He wakes up in the morning in Mar-a-Lago thinking about himself, how he can help his billionaire friends gain power and control, and force their extreme agenda on the rest of us. Listen to what he says. He says, quote, "I'll be dictator on day one." Quote, "I am your retribution."
Biden said he and Trump have competing visions for the U.S. economy that raise questions of fundamental fairness.
Folks, where we come from matters. When I look at the economy, I don't see it through the eyes of Mar-a-Lago. I see it through the eyes of Scranton, and that's not hyperbole. That's a fact. Where honesty and decency matter. Where faith matters. Where family is everything.
Trump says being tied up in court while Biden is out campaigning is not fair.
I should be right now in Pennsylvania, in Florida, in many other states, North Carolina, Georgia, campaigning. This is all coming from the Biden White House because the guy can't put two sentences together. He can't campaign. The music is in order to try and win an election.
Trump has squeezed in some New York campaigning around the trial, but his time in more competitive states appears, for the moment, confined to the weekends. Trump rallied supporters in Pennsylvania last Saturday and has a North Carolina event scheduled for this Saturday. Scott Stearns, VOA News.
The trial to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas for his handling of the U.S.-Mexico border has been ended by the U.S. Senate. The articles of impeachment were dismissed as Democrats argued that they were unconstitutional and failed to meet the high standards of high crimes and misdemeanors. In February, the House narrowly voted to impeach Mayorkas, alleging that he refused to enforce immigration laws. For more on the issue of immigration and Secretary Mayorkas, VOA's Paul Ndiho joins me live from Capitol Hill. Paul, what happened at the impeachment trial of the Homeland Security Secretary at the U.S. Senate?
Thanks, Esther. Interesting developments here. A lot of mixed reactions depending on who you talk to. If it's a Democrat, this was a great day for democracy. If you talk to Republicans, this was a travesty for the justice system here in the United States. So simply put, an impeachment is an indictment. It's like a prosecutor bringing a charge. And in this particular case, the U.S. Congress impeached a Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Once that charge was leveled against him, it became a crime. So he had to go to the Senate to be tried. But fascinating things happened yesterday. Everything was in motion as it was supposed to be. The articles were read, and once the articles were read in the full House of the Senate, the senators decided that maybe these charges did not rise up to that level. So essentially what ended up happening, we're anticipating this trial to go on or drag on for a couple of days or if not weeks, but it all just ended in less than 3 hours.
So, right, Paul, now, you know, issues of legal matters are really complicated sometimes. Can you tell us the purpose, for the purpose of the audience here, what's the difference here? The impeachment and motion of no confidence, can any one of these remove an elected official from office here in the U.S.?
Well, thank you, Esther. That's a great question. Let me maybe, for context, let me use these examples. So in the presidential system, this is what we have here in the United States. A president, a vice president, judges, and cabinet secretaries can be impeached. It takes about 1/3 of the majority to impeach any leader, as opposed to a motion of no confidence. Let's say in the United Kingdom or in Africa, let's say, for example, South Africa is one of those countries that uses a parliamentary system. In the context of South Africa, you have a president who is the chairman of the party or the president of the party. But then whenever people don't think that he has done a great job, they go to parliament and the parliament will bring up a motion of no confidence against him. And it has happened previously with former President Jacob Zuma and the current president Cyril Ramaphosa.
Oh, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your reporting, making things clear. VOA's Paul Ndiho, live for us from Capitol Hill. Still to come, giving Americans a taste of Ethiopian honey wine. We'll be right back.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
In other news, West Africa is witnessing its worst heat wave in living memory, which a report said on Thursday was linked to fossil fuel-driven climate change. Despite a lack of data, World Weather Attribution estimates there were hundreds of possibly thousands of heat-related deaths. And Britain's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda will be debated on Monday, April 22nd in the House of Commons, according to the UK government. This sets the date for what it hopes will be the last stage in a protracted parliamentary battle over the scheme. And a government-run school in Cameroon's capital is teaching students how to manufacture plant-based meat, an innovation which the school's director hopes will contribute to the fight against climate change. Anne Zwaku has more from Yaoundé in this report narrated by Moki Edwin Kinzeka.
On this day at the Women's Training Center of Yaoundé 6, students and their guests are eating soy meat, a vegetable-based product. It was made on site by Marie-Noël Abena, the director of the government-run vocational school.
If a part of the population consumes plant-based meats produced from soy, it will contribute in our way to the fight against climate change.
Scientists say the production of meat, especially beef, is a big driver of global warming. Cows produce methane, a potent greenhouse gas, and when forests are cleared to make way for grazing land, carbon dioxide is released into the air. To combat the problem, Abena decided to teach the manufacture of soy-based meat. It begins with clearing and washing the soybeans. Abena and the students create a soy paste and add ingredients like carrots and parsley and other vegetables. Through the process, students also learn about the nutritional benefits of plant-based meat.
Learning how to make soy meat will allow me to help people who naturally do not eat animal meat. They will have an option, which is to eat soy meat, which is said to have several nutrients.
The soy paste is left to rest for about an hour and can then be cooked like any other meat. Officials with the Ministry of Environment tout the benefits.
What is important here is to limit emissions. This is one of the credos of the fight against climate change. It is necessary to make the comparison between what the meat production process brings in terms of carbon footprint and what soy, considered as an alternative, could also impact in terms of greenhouse gas emissions.
Climate scientists say eating more plants and fewer animals is among the simplest, cheapest, and most readily available ways for people to reduce their impact on the environment. As for the soy meat products, they have found an audience in Yaoundé. Until now, people have bought soya to make porridge for babies. Now, plant-based meat is becoming part of local eating habits. For Anne Zwanke in Yaoundé, Cameroon, Moki Edwin Kinzeka for VOA News.
Gize Neguse, CEO of Negus Winery, is on a mission to introduce Americans to Ethiopian culture through the experience of drinking tej, also known as honey wine. With a recipe dating back over 3,000 years, Negus Winery brings a unique and delicious taste of Ethiopia to the United States. VOA's Philip Alexiou has more.
Which one is your guys' favorite? wine?
The honey wine.
I like sweet. So
Yes, that's my mom's recipe.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the reason why I call it Mama's honey wine.
Okay.
When I lived in San Francisco, I got a chance to visit a lot of top wineries, including Robert Mondavi and some other big ones. And this is semi-sweet, filtered.
Okay.
And then I couldn't find any wineries carry our product or honey wine or tej. So I was like, you know, it's better if I start something completely different for the people who never tried it before, something completely different, which is honey wine or tej. Tej is over 3,000 years recipe. It dates back over 3,000 years, the time of Queen of Sheba. Internationaloቹ ናቸው እነዚህ የአማሪካ አይደለም. Those guys are from Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia, we drink tej in the different kind of vessel. We call it brele, B-E-R-E-L-E. So they cheers each other because that's how they celebrate drinking tej. We call it tej honey wine.
Yeah, so my friend Molly found it online, and she recommended it as like the first Ethiopian winery in the area. I had never had honey wine before, and I thought I really wanted to see what it was like. And it's truly been a delicious, delightful afternoon.
So my mom she's very good at it. I told her, hey, I really want to start a honey wine. I really want to introduce, but there is a big Ethiopian community in the Washington, D.C. area outside of Ethiopia. So I told her I need to move to D.C. or Virginia so that I can, you know, start my business where my niche markets are. And also, I'll introduce for those who never had honey wine before. And Virginia became one of the top destinations for wineries down Purcellville. So I went to Purcellville and then I checked some of the wineries, and none of them had like carry honey wine.
So this is my first time. I actually found out about this due to, I think it was a DCist profile or maybe the Washingtonian. And the wine is fantastic. Especially the honey wine, we've really enjoyed it, and no complaints here at all. We'll definitely be here again.
I love that it's also bringing Ethiopian culture and drink here in Alexandria.
My dream is to introduce our culture into the United States. To me, it's a big opportunity to introduce something completely different than grape wines.
Okay, we wrap up with that story of tej. That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
Season 4, rocking with the best.